Hello everyone, I'm here today with Tobias Fors for the Let's Test roving reporter. How are you doing, Tobias?
I'm just fine. How are you?
Very good, very good. I'm hoping our internet will stand up and actually allow us to have a conversation.
Let's hope so.
Excellent. So today we're here to talk about your role in Let's Test and what you're going to bring to Let's Test, and I'd also like to talk a bit about you as well. So how do we come to be having this conversation? How did you get involved? What's led up to you with participating in Let's Test?
Basically, my connection with Let's Test starts with the people behind the conference. So I got to know Henrik and Johan at a fabulous conference that used to be held in the United States called the AYE conference, the I conference. So that's where I first ran into these crazy guys who I came to understand were interested, to say the least, in testing. So and that was a few years ago, and we kept in touch. And when they started out with Let's Test, I was curious, of course, and I was lucky enough to be a participant at Let's Test a couple of years ago, I think in 13 or 12 perhaps, 12 or 13.
Yep.
And did a short systems thinking workshop, but also participated in the rest of the conference, and it was great. So I'm looking forward to coming back to it. But it really goes back to the personal connection with Henrik and the one who arranged the conference.
Yeah, it's a shame I missed out on those AYE conferences. I really wanted to go, but they kind of just when I kind of got the motivation up to go and do it, and the finances like no more. It's like
Yes, it's too bad, but I guess they decided that they'd had a good run and they wanted to do other things, but they were really great conferences, built completely around experiential exercises and workshops, and lots of building connections with people. So
yes, yeah.
An awesome experience.
Well, I guess that's where the Steve Smith connection comes in as well.
Yes, Steve was one of the hosts for some years at the AYE conference. So,
yeah, he's been a big presence as well the past couple of years, which is good. And so your company, is it Ceterius?
Well, it's Citeros in Swedish, but I guess it's Citrus in English. We work mostly in Sweden, so Citeros it is. We're a small consulting company, around 30-something consultants, some of us working more on the organizational side of things, with processes and building teams and leading change in some aspects. And we have one part of the business is a training leg where we do training mostly around Agile and Scrum. And then there's a bunch of programmers working in different kinds of client projects. So basically a consulting and training shop with a preference for Agile methods.
Yeah. And so there's one comment about, when organizations move towards an Agile development, that it is driven by the programmers. Is that true in your experience, and the testers have been kind of dragged along?
Well, I think it used to be true. I'm not so sure that it's true these days. These days we see more of top-down changes, which is has its own challenges. I guess if you've been trying to introduce an Agile way of working from kind of the team level going up, I'm sure that's hard. It doesn't get much easier just because you do it top down, I'm afraid to say. But as Agile has come to spread, we've seen more and more top-down change programs where management basically says, let's go Agile. And then everybody has to scramble and figure out what the hell that means. So it's changed over the years.
I guess it's the force on the wall of resistance, isn't it? So I've been in experience of the teams trying out Agile ideas themselves, and then they meet the wall of resistance, like the DBAs and the project, and they're like, oh, we can't do it. What are you doing? You can't make a request for a database change the day before we go live? No. So I guess you have it the other way now. Do you have the kind of teams resisting, going, we don't want to go Agile, we're quite happy?
Well, there's always resistance and change. I guess the trick is to use the resistance in some kind of productive way, to actually see the resistance as valuable information that you can work with and try to figure out why, for example, it's a problem to make late changes in the database schema, and see what we can do about it. Do we want to make late changes like that? Well, then we have to do something to make it possible so it isn't quite as scary.
Yeah. I think it's Weinberg says, isn't it? People aren't resistant to change; they're just a lot slower to come around to the way of thinking.
Yeah, well, sounds reasonable. I mean, I sure do resist change from time to time, maybe most of the time, and sometimes I come around if the arguments are right and if people decide to involve me in the change. And,
not bypass you. Cool. So I see that you've learned Scrum from Ken himself, Ken Schwaber. How was that?
Well, that was a weird experience. We actually, it's not as exotic as it might sound. What we did was we came across Scrum about 12 or 13 years ago at a client in Uppsala, which is my hometown, north of Stockholm in Sweden. And as I remember it, we tried to convince them to go and try out something called XP, or Extreme Programming. And they said, well, it sounds nice, but it sounds kind of extreme, doesn't it? But we found this thing called Scrum, the client said, so let's do Scrum. So they decided to do Scrum, and one of my colleagues was working as a programmer there at the time, and he came back home to our office and said, well, everything's great now, we're finally shipping stuff, and testers and programmers are working together in harmony, and the person who used to sit in a separate room and give us mock-ups in Microsoft Visio for the user interface is now in the same room as us, and we're actually cooperating on a daily basis, and quality has gone up, and everybody's happy, and it's just amazing. So he decided to actually go learn more about this Scrum thing. So he took one of the first Scrum trainings Ken offered in Europe, which was in Milan, I think, in 2003, possibly. And came back home and said, oh, it was a really interesting course, really weird. And lots of simulations and discussions and role play with Ken about this weird thing called Scrum, but it sounded interesting, so we decided to give Ken a call and ask him if he'd like to come to Sweden and teach one of his classes, which he did. And I was in that class and thought it was very interesting. And I'm the kind of person that if I think something sounds all right and interesting, and it sounds like kind of the story fits, then I need to try it. I don't have to have examples. I don't need to have references. If it sounds right, I'm game for it. So I was just about to go in and do an assignment as a project manager with a client, and they were in the middle of a big methodology transition, which wasn't really finished, kind of in a undefined state at the time. So I decided to try the Scrum stuff, and it worked out quite well. We shipped a project that had been stalled for a long time, and it's actually still up and running in that organization 12 years later. So it worked well enough for me to think that, hey, this Scrum thing is kind of interesting. So I started to learn more about that. And, well, that's basically what I've been doing ever since, not just Scrum, but Scrum and Agile methods in general. And the last few years I've been working with coaching organizations and kind of adopting these changes come about as a result of choosing Scrum or Agile. Yeah. But that's the background. We basically asked Ken to come and teach us about Scrum.
Nice. But that's I quite like that, because you're not getting it second hand from an Agile consultant who's just selling it out of the box.
Well,
you get it from the horse's mouth.
That was useful for us, at least. Ken had his take on what Scrum is, and it's certainly not the same thing as I hear propagated from time to time, and definitely not the same thing as what I see happening in many organizations. And I guess that's something that always happens with any kind of packaged approach.
Yeah.
That we tend to pick out the really concrete stuff, like stand-ups and kinds of meetings and roles you have, and we apply those, and we forget about the essence, the philosophy behind it. So that was probably useful to hear it from Ken directly at an early stage.
That's it, the underlying why.
Yes, and that's one of the things that I think that attracted me to Scrum was that when Ken talked about it, he actually made an effort to explain why you were supposed to do certain things, which for me, 12 years ago, was the first time I actually heard someone from the management side of things bother to explain the why. So there's no shortage of people telling you as a programmer or project manager the how or what you're supposed to do, but this was new to me, that somebody actually said, well, the reason you need to use an empirical approach to managing software projects has to do with the complexity inherent in these kinds of situations. I was like, whoa, that's interesting. Why haven't I heard about this before?
But yeah, I think we're getting the same kind of thing with Camban now, aren't we? People are trying to package up the concrete elements of Camban and sell that.
Yes. So it happens to everything, and that's just the way it is. We love our quick tips and checklists and concrete advice that you can act on the day after you come home from your training. And I mean, those things are useful too. But if you want long-lasting change, you probably have to dig a little bit deeper than just the surface level. But I don't think we can avoid it. It happens. It happens all the time. It's annoying, but that's the way it is. That doesn't mean we shouldn't stop trying to dig deeper. That's what gives me more energy to kind of go beyond the method and understand why are we getting the results we're getting.
That's it. Yeah, it's just the start, isn't it? It's like, oh right, okay, I can see this is a benefit. Now, why does this even work?
Yes.
Yeah. I know the resistance I have is like, so we time box a sprint to 2 weeks, say, and we're not going to finish in 2 weeks. Let's just extend it by a couple of days. And I'm like, no, that's kind of defeating the point. You want to see where the weaknesses are and where it's pushing your boundaries, and see if you need to change your sprint to 3 week cycles if we can't fit whole iteration in. And it's just kind of having those conversations. But people don't like to be seen to fail, do they? It's like, the environment I was in at the time.
Well, that's right, and that's one of the kind of major lessons that I have picked up over the years is that in some organizations, the transparency you get from an approach like Scrum or Kanban isn't really helpful to people's careers. So in blaming organizations, there's so much to lose from showing the real state of things that it's just too traumatic. And in those situations, of course, it doesn't matter what kind of methodology you use. Because as soon as you talk about the real state of things, somebody's going to blame you and you might even get fired. So there's a huge difference in using Scrum in a congruent, non-blaming organization that's really striving to improve, and in an organization that's just looking to find the next person to blame for the bad results. I'm sorry to say it took me too many years to understand how significant that difference is.
Yeah. I mean, I have to confess, I don't think I've seen Scrum done correctly in the roles that I've been in. In a very limited time, I've not seen it done correctly because I'm not convinced. So basically, I'm not convinced by Scrum because of the way I've seen it done. So I'd really like to go and see like a really good shining beacon of an example.
Yes, that's what everybody's looking for. A pristine example that you can look at and learn from. And I'm sorry to say, I'm not sure I've seen Scrum used correctly myself. I mean, it's what I usually look for is, are we getting the results we're looking for, and are we getting them in a way that's somewhat pleasing to the people working in the organization? And so that's the key question, and then we can look at how well we're using a method like Scrum, for example.
Yeah.
But it needs to be in that order, otherwise, it's easy to make things worse by applying the methodology or the framework more strictly, and you might get a perfect. End up in a situation where you're actually following along the cookbook, and everybody hates it. So that's not what we're looking for.
Yeah. That's what I quite like about Cambank, because it kind of draws a line in the sand, doesn't it? This is where we are now. It doesn't impose any new frameworks on anyone. It's just like, right, here we are now. Let's just see how we can improve. What kind of workflow are we getting through at the moment? So it's kind of for those people who are or may be resistant to change. It's a kind of, I can go with this. All right, so we just try these small safe to fail experiments, and you look back in 6 months, and before you know it, you have improved. You're not imposing this whole new framework on everyone. That people are like, whoa, I like the way I was doing it before.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Okay, so moving on to Let's Test then. You're running a feedback bootcamp.
Yes.
Do you want to talk to us about this without putting too many spoilers in?
There's so much to say about feedback, so there's no way I can spoil it in a few minutes, I think. But this is a workshop that I've been doing every now and then over the last 6 or 7 years. We initially developed it as a really short workshop for internal use at our company to train ourselves in the art of giving and receiving interpersonal feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've done it with clients and in different situations. So what we'll be working with in the workshop is feedback, but specifically the kind of feedback that people give to other people.
Okay.
And for that, we need someone who's actually sending out feedback and somebody who's receiving it. So we'll be practicing giving and receiving feedback, and we'll be discussing and exploring possibly the mental models that we have of what feedback is, because it turns out that if you take a look at what people think of when they think of interpersonal feedback, we tend to have very different definitions of what that is. So,
of course, yeah.
So we'll be exploring that a little bit. We'll do a few exercises and a little bit of practice and see what we can learn from it.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's a big thing, isn't it, giving feedback, especially if if people don't want it or weren't expecting it.
Yes.
It's kind of like preparing them. Can I?
Yes. Can I give you some feedback? Well, here it is anyway. So that's one of the things I guess we'll be talking about, how to kind of open the door to being able to give feedback instead of just kicking the door in and throwing the feedback in like an explosive, hurl it through the door and say, "Oh, hey, you take my feedback now, and you better be thankful."
Yeah.
So we'll discuss that. So there are many traps you can fall into when it comes to feedback.
So you'd be tackling anything like the 360-degree appraisal, the feedback, that kind of. Are you tackling those in those within the organisation?
Well, I would have if I had been exposed to it or used it myself. I haven't used the 360-degree feedback model, so I guess the answer is no. That said, I always try to design the workshop so as to extract the maximum amount of experiences and insights from all the participants in the group. So to the extent that somebody in the group has experiences around that, I'm sure we'll be able to fit it in somehow.
I mean, that's the beauty of experience, isn't it? People get to bring their own experiences to the show.
It is. It's definitely the beauty, and also slightly provocative, because after all, if you have an expert in the room, shouldn't that have all the answers? Well, that would be nice. I still think it's kind of unlikely that you bring in a person, even a skilled and smart one, and for that person to have more insights than the sum of all the people in the room. So we try to make the workshops in a way that we can actually use all the experience in the room.
Yeah.
So that'll be a big part of the workshop.
Be interesting if there's someone there who just doesn't like the idea of feedback at all. I know there was a blog post circling a couple of years back, wasn't there, about like, don't give me feedback. And it's just like, because of the pretentiousness of it all, with someone else offering their opinion on you is like quite hard for some people to take. It's like, but then I disagreed with the post. I said, well, I quite like feedback. I don't care how it's delivered, as long as I've got something I can work with. I got one that said, you're trying too hard. Mm-hmm. I was like, okay, and what do I do with that?
Yes. So we'll be talking quite a bit about what feedback is and what it needs to be for it to be useful. So so I guess part of the problem is that we have so many different definitions of what feedback is. And if I think that feedback is just hurling my opinion at you, and you expect something actionable, maybe based in actual observations or data, well, there's bound to be some kind of conflict.
Yeah.
And when it comes to people not liking feedback, well, yes. I mean, after all, the interpersonal feedback is probably the worst way of trying to change somebody. There's just so much attention built into the situation. So giving feedback is really hard. So I guess we might be touching on the fact that, given that it's the worst way of changing somebody else, what else can we do if we want to achieve change?
That's it. Here's a stick of feedback. Let me beat you with it. Now, why aren't you behaving? Yes. Fantastic. Okay, and then Let's Test Itself. Are you still there?
I'm still there, yes.
Okay, so Let's Test Itself. So you've been before?
Yes, once.
Once? When was that, 2012, did you say, or 2013?
I think it was 12 or 13. My memory isn't quite as perfect as I would like to, but 12 or 13, I think.
Oh, brilliant. So you kind of, know what to expect already?
Well, yes, I do. I really liked the first time around, with lots of experiential workshops and the fact that you actually stay on site and you stay overnight, so you can actually hang out with people during breakfast and have a few drinks afterwards and get to know people, which is, I like that.
Did you actually get a chance to confer? Did you get that? You there?
Yes, but it broke up. I heard you get a chance to.
You get a chance to actually confer.
Oh yes,
at a conference.
That little part of things, which is so often forgotten, and I find that for every year that passes, I get less and less interested in just sitting in a conference and listening to somebody presenting. I mean, it can be really interesting. The thing is, I can find so many interesting presentations on YouTube, for example. Like Ben, who's speaking at Let's Test this year, he's also available on YouTube. So if I just wanted to listen to a presentation, there are easier ways to get to that. But of course, if I want to meet Ben, then there's that's a good reason to go to Let's Test. I actually did meet Ben a few years ago in Phoenix at the AYE conference over dinner. So
brilliant.
But I like the part of I like how the conference is designed to actually get together and confer.
Yeah, I know when I walked in by myself and I kind of just sat down with Scott Barber, and I can't remember who it was. I just kind of didn't invade their conversation, but I just sat down. But I thought, oh God, how rude! But everyone was so welcoming. They're like, oh, hi, yeah, Duncan. Like, yes, yeah. Like, oh, how you doing? Da, da, da. And I just love that. It's all really welcoming and really friendly. And there's I haven't come across with pretentiousness yet. Probably there, but I'd probably avoid it. But yeah. So you mentioned you're going to bump into Ben again. Is anyone else on the? Have you had a chance to look at the schedule? Who are you going to go and see?
Well, I did take a brief look. So there are a few names I can recognize here. I haven't decided on any sessions, but I noticed that Luis Pearl has one workshop on nonviolent communication.
Yep.
I'm reading a book about that right now, so
that's very good timing. I'm chatting to her on Wednesday.
What's that?
I'm chatting to Lou on Wednesday.
Ah, excellent.
Yeah.
Yes. So that sounds interesting. And of course, Ben's workshop about testing in public sounds really interesting as well.
Yeah.
Then, of course, I'm not a professional tester. I guess one of the few at Let's Test who doesn't actually work with testing on a professional basis. I'm more of a hang-around to the testing community, I guess, which goes for everything I do. I usually describe myself as the idiot for hire. I know a little bit about everything and nothing about anything. That didn't come out really good, but I guess that's what I do. So I guess I'll be trying to pick the workshop and the sessions that I see have kind of a more general appeal, rather than perhaps the specific practicing the kind of the tester's craft, which would be too difficult for me as an amateur in that craft.
That's I know for me, I'm looking forward to Defense Against the Dark Arts with Lauren and Michael.
That sounds intriguing.
Yes, yeah. Be really good.
There's also a workshop called Let's Learn, which also makes me a bit curious to know. Yes, let's learn. But what? I don't know. I'm still interested in it. I love to learn stuff. So
is it learning in general? Or?
Well, it's just called Let's Learn on the schedule I have here.
Yeah. Christian. That'd be good. Yeah, I do like the format that the Johan and Henke have set up. Just like with the big kind of workshops and the day one. But yeah. Anyway, I get lost. I keep going through the schedule going, I'll go to that. A lot of it is, though, because I help facilitate as well. A lot of it is which ones haven't already been taken by the other facilitators.
I see.
So, yeah, it's good. But you end up going to ones that you wouldn't normally expect to go to, which I find really interesting. It's like, So that wasn't on my wish list, but going to it, it's like, I've learned a lot from that, a lot more than I expected.
That's great.
Yeah.
So pick the sessions that are bound to surprise you.
Yeah, I mean, last year I said, give me whatever session you want to whoever's the lead facilitator, as it were. And I just filled in any holes I could. It was great. I think because I didn't have the stress of having to present. I didn't have that hanging over my head. It was just like, I can just come along and facilitate. Perfect. Do a bit of roving reporting.
Sounds nice.
Yeah. Good. Fantastic. Okay. Is there anything more on Let's Test before we move on to the final chapter, as it were?
Well, nothing aside from looking forward to it. It's going to be great to be there again and meet all the people, and meet some new people.
That's it. Good chance to relax and talk testing. Cool.
Yes.
Okay, so you're also author of a couple of books. So there's Scrum Tips, which is already out there, and Pitfalls of Scrum that you're working on.
Yes.
Which one do you want to talk about first? Should you do Scrum Tips first because it's in the bag?
Yeah, yes. Well, I guess it is. It actually started out as a blog a few years ago. I started to just write the occasional blog post, and having done that for maybe 5 or 6 years, I basically collected the blog posts, or selected a few of them at least, and recomposed it a little bit and put it together in an ebook that's available online for people who want to have some practical advice on Scrum. So it's in Swedish and available on the LeanPub platform. And it has a few readers. It's been a fun experiment to try and do that. It's really easy to get started with publishing digital books these days. So it's been like an experiment. And I love the LeanPub platform, which I really can recommend to anybody, starting out writing something, trying out their first book writing project. It's really easy to get started. I'm sure it lacks lots of features that you can get in other places.
Yeah. Oh, you've broken up. You go on. Yeah, I heard you get features in other places.
Yes, I said there's probably lots of more cool features in other places, but LeanPub is a great way to get started. It's been a great way to get started for me.
Yeah. Well, I think that goes. I think someone asked a question the other day. Has the technique of writing a book from beginning to end in one sitting, is that done and dusted now? Like if we talk about the way we write software, is the way we write books the same? And LeanPub kind of helps you with that, doesn't it? It's just like, well, I'll write this bit and I'll build it incrementally and to see how it goes. Does LeanPub help you with that as an author?
Yeah, I guess. Well, it does. I'm still new to this whole writing books thing, so I'm sure there's much more you can do with a new book I'm working on called Pitfalls of Scrum. I guess there's always the option of releasing it a bit earlier than you otherwise would to get some feedback, maybe incorporate that feedback and then republish. But I guess the book writing world is figuring out how to use this. Then again, how many times as a reader do you want to reread a book? But I do know from my own experience that books that I've been looking forward to, like Jeff Patton's book on story mapping that's out recently, and Goiko Adsik's book on user stories, are books that I've re-downloaded several times as they've released new editions of them, which is perfectly fine for me because I know that the content is going to be top-notch.
Yeah. So how are you tackling Pitfalls of Scrum? Are you doing a chapter at a time, or are you writing all the chapters and just building and refining, or?
Well, basically, I'm kind of hurting and painfully dragging myself through writing this. It started out as an idea to write a little bit about my experience of tackling the kind of deeper pitfalls of Scrum, not the basic pitfalls, which tend to be like discussions around how long meetings should be or what exactly is in a specific role. But I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into the pitfalls that have to do with changing your mindset from kind of a traditional mindset to a more agile Scrum mindset. So the idea was clear enough when I started out last year, but it's really hard work to put a book together. So my initial idea was to actually publish a first version last year. And right now I'm content with just struggling and dragging it along, kicking and screaming. It will get published eventually. We'll see when. So, but my methodology is basically I keep collecting ideas and experiences as I go along, and every now and then I get reminded of something, and then I'll write it down in a little note somewhere on my computer, and the next time I have the manuscript in front of me, I'll just pull it up and integrate the new pieces and get it going. But I have a huge respect for people who write on a schedule every day. I've never managed to install that routine in my own operating system. Maybe I will in the future. We'll see. It's really interesting how challenging it is to actually sit down at a specific time every day and write a set amount of words. So anybody who can do that is a hero in my in my mind.
I struggle doing that with a blog post. It's just getting that motivation and following that energy, isn't it? Just like, so for me, it's just like, oh, I think I'm going to write a blog post. I've got something in me. I'll start it. And then, but actually, as you say, sitting down at set time for a set period and just dum, finishing it. Fair play.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I guess that's what separates a professional from an amateur.
Yeah.
So this quote, I can't remember from which famous author, is said, well, some people say they only write when inspiration strikes. Luckily for me, my inspiration strikes at 9 a.m. every morning, every day of the week. That's the professional take on writing.
Yeah.
The rest of us are just amateurs.
Yeah. That's it, always learning.
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, Tobias, is there anything else you'd like to talk about before we wrap up?
Well, I'm looking forward to Let's Test. Looking forward to meeting people in my workshop, and looking forward to attending other people's workshops and lectures. So that'll be fun, and people who want to learn a little bit more about giving and taking feedback should meet me. The
Fantastic.
Feedback Bootcamp.
Feedback Bootcamp. And what day is your session on?
It is, I think it's the last day of the conference, right? On 27th. Yes.
11 o'clock, yep.
Around there, yeah.
From 11 o'clock on the last day. Fantastic. All right.
Awesome.
Thanks, Tobias. And I look forward to seeing you at Let's Test. Be good to catch up in for real and share a beer.
As well. Thanks.
Okay, look after yourself.
You too. Bye.
Bye.